Now that we've done the heavy lifting of creating our base plan and assessing our site conditions, it's time to get creative. In this video, we will be creating our design layout plan, which will show how all of the different elements in our garden will be arranged. And we will add to this in the next video when we add the details about our plants and our planting plan. Something to remember is that the design process is a little bit like writing a story with many different possible outcomes. There isn't necessarily one right way to lay out your site, but the most important thing is that you enjoy the process and the end result. In this video, we will be creating the design layout on our blank base plan, which is the one that doesn't have the dimensions on it. So if you haven't already done so, make sure you have plenty of copies of that on hand. We'll first start by going over some basic design concepts, and then we'll move on to the specific process of creating the site layout plan. As we work through creating the layout plan, you will be considering both small sections of your garden as well as the overall design. To make sure that your site ends up being a cohesive whole, there are some design concepts that you will want to keep in mind throughout. Balance refers to how we perceive the way that objects relate to one another and whether everything appears to be stable when we look at it. This relates to the visual weight of objects. For example, I might balance a medium-sized tree with an open canopy by planting 2 or 3 smaller, denser shrubs on the opposite side of the garden. Contrast and harmony are used to create a combination of excitement and order in a design. Contrasted objects stand out because they appear different to the viewer, while harmonious objects appear to be related. For example, a sea of grasses with various shades of green appears harmonious and could be contrasted nicely with some bright blooms. Unity refers to how different parts of your design come together to create a sense of wholeness. It is often achieved through repetition, which can be repetition of a shape, color, particular plant, or really any element. Before you start in on drawing your design layout, you'll want to consider your goals for your garden. These might be functional goals like incorporating a seating area, or aesthetic goals like 3-season blooms. You should also take into account your context and lines of sight from key locations on your property. We'll make a list of these goals and then keep them nearby when you are drawing the design layout to make sure that the design addresses most or all of them. You'll also want to consider the overall feeling you'd like your garden to have. Maybe you want a really wild-looking garden where the plants are all interspersed with one another, or maybe you want a more orderly planting where the plants are done in groups. If you're new to gardening, grouping by species is a really great way to start. For our garden site, we've decided on some goals that include attracting pollinators, seed collection, and a space for the homeowners and their children to enjoy. We do have a major line of sight to consider, which is from the back of the house to the pond beyond, so we don't want to block that view fully and might consider something like a pathway down the middle of the garden. We've also decided on a fairly organized planting with some plants interspersed for a natural flair. This will make maintenance and seed collection a bit easier. You may need to try arranging all of these different areas on your base plan in a few different ways until you're happy with the results. Once you've completed this, you will have the backbone of your layout. Remember that you're working from a scaled base plan, so you can make use of the measurements to approximate sizes for the different areas. Throughout each of these steps, you want to make sure that you have your site conditions map on hand so that you remember your site parameters as you come up with the design. For example, you might want to locate a seating area in a shady part of your site. I've decided on the following arrangement for our site and added in some focal species that I know I'm for sure going to want to include as well. I've also made a few notes on approximate heights of plants. If you already know that, you can certainly start to add those in, but you can also wait until a little bit further along in the design process to start to think about this. Once you've decided on where these overall areas will be, you can start to fill in the details. If you need materials for a seating area or pathway, for example, this is a good time to start to mark those in. This is also the time to add more detail to your planting areas. If you're planting in groups like we are, think about how you can arrange these groups to fit together nicely. You can see that for our garden design, I took the larger planting areas and divided them into smaller pieces. These, for me, represent the locations and arrangements of distinct species. Once I'm happy with the arrangement, I will once again make some copies to use going forward. You may choose to label each planting area with a number as well. Now it's time to bring your site conditions and goals together and decide on the sorts of qualities you want the plants in each planting area to have. Consider things like bloom time, height, and spread for different areas. For example, in planting area 10 on my drawing, I know that the site is moist and sunny, and aesthetically I would like a low-growing flower there. So I'm going to just note that in on the sheet, and I'll carry that with me into the planting plan. Noting these details will really make plant selection easy in the next video. As you work through this process, recall the design concepts again and think about how your planting layout could be balanced, have contrast and harmony, and be unified. And again, we'll work more on this in the next video as well. Your end result will be a detailed layout plan like this one, as well as some copies of the blank layout plan to use in the next video.